through the afternoon, though a bit of a chilly feel to things, with temperatures perhaps a touch down on average for the time of year, and then wet and windy weather arriving in time for the weekend.
Very good morning. We're just talking about what we're going to be talking about on the show today. We've got a lot to get through. Palestinian protests last night, not just at the weekends now, up on the statues. You're not happy about it?
War memorials, in fact. And police say they don't have the powers to kick them off. Why not? They should have the powers. I think it's outrageous. And I'm frankly sick to death of them on our streets all the time. There's a war going on in Gaza, don't they know? We're
going to be debating that anyway. And also, the Labour Party in absolute crisis this morning.
A quarter of his MPs voting in favour of a ceasefire now, and he's had to sack a lot of front benches, and I think a lot more are going to get the push.
And what's happening to Rishi after he's now going to overrule the Supreme Court. Don't go anywhere.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's Thursday, the 16th of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Rishi is fighting back. The Supreme Court said that the government's migrant plan was unlawful yesterday, but that will not stop, apparently, the Prime Minister pushing ahead with it.
Will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. I will not allow a foreign court to block these flights. When I said I would stop the boats, I meant it.
And problems too for the Labour Party. A major rebellion for Sir Keir Starmer. His authority's taken a huge blow. 8 front benches have quit or been sacked after 56 MPs rebelled over a ceasefire in Gaza.
And lawless Britain. Last night, pro-Palestinian protesters were able to climb on the Royal Artillery Memorial at Hyde Park Corner in London. The Met Police say that they don't have the powers to arrest someone for climbing on a memorial. Are we becoming lawless? We're going to be having a little debate about that. We want to know what you think.
Yeah.
Do we want to give the police more powers in situations like this? Maybe you think that you would like to see that. GBViews at gbnews.com is the email address.
And maybe you're just sick to death of these protesters on the streets all the time, because I've got to tell you, I'm fed up with them.
Well, first, though, here is your very latest news with Sophia.
Good morning, it's 9:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Lord David Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary. Video of the surprise visit to Kyiv was posted on social media, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he's grateful for the UK's support, given the world isn't focused on the war in his country. The talks address the need for weapons on the front line, strengthening air defence and protecting Ukraine's infrastructure and people.
I admire the strength and determination of the Ukrainian people. And what I want to say by being here is that we will continue to give you the moral support, the diplomatic support, the economic support, but above all, the military support that you need, not just this year and next year, but for however long it takes.
The Prime Minister insists flights to Rwanda will go ahead in the spring as planned. Rishi Sunak is looking to introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's asylum policy is unlawful. The Prime Minister says he's working on a new international treaty to ensure the East African nation is deemed safe. The Shadow Defence Secretary says Labour isn't a party of protest and both firmness and discipline are needed. John Healey's comments come in the wake of a major rebellion over the party's position on the Gaza war. 56 of Sir Keir Starmer's MPs rejected their leader's stance and voted for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Jess Phillips, Afzal Khan and Yasmin Qureshi are among 8 shadow ministers who have left their jobs to back an SNP motion. Train drivers will stage a fresh round of strikes to ratchet up the pressure in their long-running dispute over pay. ASLEF union members will walk out between the 2nd and 9th of December, with different train companies affected on each day. Drivers will also refuse to work any overtime. Little progress has been made in the row, with union bosses rejecting a pay offer back in spring. And millions of women in England will soon be able to access free contraception on the high street without having to see a GP. From next month, women in England can get the pill by visiting their local pharmacy. It's part of new NHS plans to free up appointments in doctor surgeries. Pharmacies will need to sign up for the service. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 9:34. We've made it to Thursday. It's been a heck of a week in politics. What a week. Now, pro-Palestine protests. Chaos broke out across London last night. The protesters scaled some of our war memorials and shut down major roads in the capital.
Just so fed up with these people. They climbed on the Royal Artillery Memorial at Hyde Park Corner after a demonstration outside the House of Parliament. This was, of course, because of the Labour Party, the vote on the motion where there was a huge Labour Party rebellion. GB News presenter Patrick Christys attended the demo last night, and this is what happened.
He's saying Israel is a terrorist.
And Hamas as well.
And Hamas as well.
Definitely.
Hello, mate. I'm with GB News.
Don't talk to GB News.
Quick question. Why are you here today?
Where are you from?
I'm just recording for GB News. Yep. Okay. Can I ask why you're covering your face? I just want to know why you're here today. Oh, yeah.
Go away, you're not wanted. Go away. You're absolutely not wanted. You're absolutely not wanted. Get away from here.
I just want to hear.
Get away from here. No, go away. You're fascist scum. You're not wanted.
Really? I just want to know your views, that's all.
Free Palestine.
What does Free Palestine mean?
A ceasefire.
So ceasefire now. Okay, and what do you think?
From the GB News.
outrageous.
Extraordinary.
They're outside the Houses of Parliament, one of the mothers of democracy, and they're saying, go away, we don't want to talk to you, you're fascist. Outrageous. What are these people? And these people are supporting a ceasefire in Gaza where Hamas, who've got no respect for democracy or women's rights and have got hostages, and that's their view.
And they think Patrick Christys is a fascist.
Yeah.
Trust me, Patrick Christys is not a fascist. As Patrick said then, we just want to hear your views. That's what I find extraordinary. People won't talk to us because they say, oh, no, we're not going to talk to GB News.
And he was
talk to us.
Right to flag up too. Why are they covering their faces? What are they hiding
Honestly.
from? The police do have powers to get people to remove those masks but they don't.
Let's just let you know what the police said.
Two-tier police.
The Metropolitan Police said that the protesters had not broken any laws by their actions. They said that while police officers were on the scene quickly, we regret they were not there quickly enough to prevent the protesters accessing the memorial. They say there is no law explicitly making it illegal to climb on a memorial, so officers cannot automatically arrest, but they can intervene and make it clear that their behaviour is not acceptable. Now, here's the thing.
Are we becoming a lawless society? Look, I don't like more laws. And when people complain that Parliament's not sitting, well, I said we don't want them sitting because they only pass more stupid laws which normally irritate everyone and they get them wrong. But actually, a war memorial is there to respect the fallen. And they should be treated with respect.
This is where you and I disagree, because I think we have to be really careful when we're asking for the solution to every problem to be more powers. Who's the politician you hate most in the world, past or present? Who could you think of?
Too long a list.
Who terrifies you?
Blair.
Right. Imagine that Blair...
He brought in the Supreme Court, by the way, which we didn't need before.
Imagine Blair is Prime Minister again. It is not beyond the realms of possibility, remember. Imagine he is Prime Minister and he is doing things that you feel so strongly about and enacting policies that you hate so much that even you, Andrew Pearce, feel the need to go and climb a memorial or a statue.
I wouldn't climb on a war
Well, that's
memorial.
fine.
Too much respect.
But you do... All right, fine. But you do need to have the right to go out. If Tony Blair is Prime Minister... I always call him President because that's how he acts, isn't it? If Tony Blair's Prime Minister, you might need those powers. Yeah. And that's all I'm saying. You might be happy with more powers with a Conservative Party in power.
It doesn't feel like a Conservative government, though,
does it? Of course it doesn't. Not in any way, shape or form. My biggest complaint with those idiots is not that they were climbing on statues and memorials, it's that they won't discuss what they feel so strongly about.
How dare they put their hand and say, go away, we don't want you here. It's not up to them.
It's incredible.
It is a public space. They're outside the Houses of Parliament.
Because what they are actually doing is suppressing free speech. They are censoring the debate. That's what we don't like.
And it's also because they don't really have a brain cell in their head. So they cannot justify
That's also
their
not
position.
illegal.
No, that's true. But there's a lot of it. Now, the government is introducing, because you heard this from Rishi, emergency legislation, which they say will mean Rwanda is a safe country and see off challenges from the Supreme Court.
That's right. It's very interesting, this. The UK Supreme Court yesterday, you might have watched it here, ruled that Sunak's flagship policy to send asylum seekers to Rwanda was unlawful, putting into question one of his 5 main pledges as Prime Minister to stop the boats.
We are unanimously of the view that they were entitled to reach that conclusion. The changes needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, but they have not been shown to be in place now. The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
Mr. Speaker, it's very straightforward. He promised that he would stop the boats this year. Yeah. This year. Today is the 15th of November. He's wasted all of his time on a gimmick, and now he's absolutely nowhere. Will he level with the British public and finally admit he's failed to deliver on his promise?
Yeah. He's been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. This is a man who described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration, and he has never once in this place voted for stricter asylum rules. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, while he might want to listen to the open border activists, I'm siding with the British people. I do not agree with this decision, but I respect it and accept it. The rule of law is fundamental to our democracy. I will not allow a foreign court to block these flights. I said I was going to fundamentally change our country, and I meant it. So I'm also announcing today that we will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. This will enable Parliament to confirm that with our new treaty, Rwanda is safe.
That was the Prime Minister, fighting back, fighting talk, but is it just that, talk? Let's go live to our political editor, Chris Hope, who's in Westminster. Chris, morning. Chris, yesterday, before the Prime Minister spoke, the mood was mutinous, to say the least, sulphurous among Conservative MPs, a humiliating defeat in the Supreme Court, crushing all 5 judges, chucking out the Rwanda plan. Has he bought himself some time, Rishi Sunak?
He has, Andrew, he has, but words can only count for so much. I think people are getting very frustrated by endless politicians, endless Prime Ministers. We had enough of those, haven't we, recently, telling us they're going to tackle and deal with, across the South Coast, illegal arrivals of migrants and not doing it, not controlling it. These are only the illegal migrants arriving. Next week, we're getting the full, the numbers are going to arrive legally. The net migration figure set to be hundreds of thousands again. That's a choice the government's made to allow that migration. So only really it's tens of thousands of illegal arrivals that are seen as a kind of symptom of a lack of grip at the top of government on this issue. We've heard from James Cleverly, the new Home Secretary today, saying he's going to upgrade what's called a Memorandum of Understanding with Rwanda to a full treaty, and to ensure that if people are taken here for processing, they can't then be returned by Rwanda to the place they were fleeing from, because that would be against their own human rights and probably against the Refugee Convention. That's the clip you heard there from the Supreme Court justices. So, yes, he's bought some time with that language. I think the Daily Mail said his eyes were burning like bright coals on the front page today. That gave him that shows the space he's got for himself with those firm words. But this can't carry on. He said the first flights will take off in the spring next year. I was in Downing Street yesterday for that press conference. I asked for a question and wasn't given one. But my question was, would you bet GB News viewers a pint of beer that anyone will be taken off and taken to Rwanda before the next election? I reckon he'd have said, I'm not sure, Chris.
Chris, it's fighting talk, and that's all very well, and I think he did perform well at the press conference, but all those things they're now doing to effectively bypass the Supreme Court, they could have done it before. They had 19 months to get this legislation right and correct when Boris Johnson first brought it forward. What are we on, our 3rd Home Secretary since then? Can't remember, maybe our 4th or even 5th. Yeah. Why didn't they do this before, which is what Suella Braverman said in her coruscating resignation letter. She'd warned him again and again and again the things they needed to do, which he's only now doing.
Yeah, why wait for Plan B now is Suella Braverman's point, and she made that very clear. Magical thinking, she said in that another withering dispatch on social media last night after the PM's press conference. But yeah, why wait till now? It does show a degree of almost hoping for the best on this policy rather than gripping it and taking control, which he should do. I mean, he's had a lot on, don't forget. He's had wars to deal with. In Ukraine, the trouble in the Middle East, that's been difficult. He's also had the chaos in the markets created in part by Liz Truss's government and the collapse of the Boris Johnson government. So but now is the time to act. He can't carry on. And it's a rod for his own back he made for himself, didn't he, Andrew and Bev? Because he said that one of his targets is stop the boat. In fact, on that podium says stop the boats. Well, come on, Prime Minister, we're waiting for that to happen.
Chris, he may have had a lot on his plate, but the Home Office and the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary, they should have been getting down and getting to the root of the detail, because Bev and I were pretty convinced that the Supreme Court were going to chuck it out. Didn't know that all 5 of them were going to do that. The lack of Plan B is a staggering failure of government.
Yeah, it is a failure. They do say call it Plan B, and they say that it can be through the parliamentary process, the Commons and the Lords within, I think it's 40 or so sitting days. That means that pushes it back into, from memory, about mid-January, maybe early February when that can happen. It's very, very tight. Of course, he may even have an election, by the way, in May next year, don't forget, although I think he's going longer, possibly as late as January 2025 to get all of what he wants to do done. But yeah, there's no question, where is the planning? If you read articles in today's Telegraph, the suggestions there that the Home Office is actually against all these plans, and indeed Suella Braverman was pushing water uphill, as it were, trying to make this happen in the Home Office. There's a degree of of blob capture of this whole policy, and civil servants almost ignoring the mandate given to this government by that 2019 general election. So he's got the will of the people behind him, I think, to a large extent, Rishi Sunak. But has he got it in him, the fight to make this happen? He appeared to have it yesterday in Downing Street at a press conference. We'll wait and see.
We had Andrea Jenkins in here yesterday, Chris, as you know, MP, who wrote the first letter of no confidence to Sir Graham Brady regarding the Prime Minister. How many more letters have we had now?
It's the first we know about, Bev.
Well, this is the question I was going to ask you. Do we know of any more yet? At this point.
Well, of course, you're totally right. I mean, few MPs actually publish their letters of no confidence in a leader, because it means they're immediately ostracised by all the other MPs who are trying to support the leader. So I think we don't know whether Dame Andrea Jenkins is the only one. We know she put hers in. She was told in the division lobby 2 nights ago, I think it was, on Tuesday night, that 6 more are putting letters in. There's reports of plotting in a Mayfair private club between more Tories. The end game isn't very clear for me. I think there's no obvious candidate to replace Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister or Tory leader. Boris Johnson, of course, having left Parliament. But I think, for me, it's a shot across the bows by the Tory right. If they can get more than 50 or so Tory MPs signing letters of no confidence to Graham Brady, the 1922 committee chairman, that may prompt a no confidence vote and force Sunak to face the challenge given to him by that mandate won by Boris Johnson in 2019 to deliver on those people's priorities, as they would call it. Because so far it's been quite operational. He's avoided doing that properly, not fully, not for the Tory right. I wonder whether it's a shot across the bows more than the leadership challenge they want to get to.
Yeah. Keir Starmer must have his head in his hands over his cornflakes this morning, Chris, because we've said multiple times that really he just has to keep everything simple and uncomplicated in the run-up to the next election, and he has a really good shot. Just explain to people what happened yesterday, because it's a bit of a technical political issue, and these 10 front benchers who have called for a ceasefire, where's it left Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party?
It comes down to the difference between 2 words, Bev and Andrew: ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities. Now, Labour put down their own motion. This is all to do with the conflict in Gaza and whether there should be a ceasefire, stop all fighting, and allow humanitarian aid to get in to alleviate the appalling suffering for people, Palestinians in Gaza. Now, the UK government's policy is the same as America, which is supporting a pause in hostilities to allow aid to get in, but not a ceasefire, because the view is that would cement Hamas's gains after the horrific terrorist attack on October the 7th. So the Labour Party is supporting the government in that idea of a pause, a cessation of hostilities, but not a ceasefire. The left of the party, the pro-Palestinian lobby within the Labour Party, want a ceasefire. And last night, the SNP put down a motion in Parliament to an amendment to King's speech calling for a ceasefire. MPs who voted for that were voting against government policy. As many as 10 Labour front benchers voted in favour of a ceasefire, and therefore they have now quit the front bench. Now, how that looks for Keir Starmer, I think it kind of helps him. It helps support the position he's going to have with the wider public, that he will not be swayed by the left of the party. He will do what's right for the country. He's made clear, as I understand it privately, to the Prime Minister when he's made Prime Minister last year, Mr Sunak, that on issues of national security, on big areas of public or foreign policy, he will back the Prime Minister. I think that we didn't see that with Jeremy Corbyn over the Salisbury poisonings. We're seeing the opposite with Keir Starmer. He's showing the rest of the public, I will take the hard choices despite my party to be strong for this country. And indeed, many of those who quit the front bench are probably left-wingers who wanted to move on anyway and bring his kind of more centrist group to run the Labour Party. So I think, although it looks difficult for him, it won't damage him. And of course, all we're talking about right now is Rwanda. We're not even talking about Labour civil war. So it has. He's a lucky general, Andrew and Bev.
All right, that's Chris Hope, our political editor. Well, let's talk straight away now to Steve McCabe, who's the Labour MP for Selly Oak, who voted with his own side last night. Steve, morning to you. 56 Labour MPs backing that ceasefire. That's a quarter of Keir Starmer's MPs. What I think is quite significant, Steve, when you look at some of those who've resigned from their front bench roles because they supported a ceasefire now, they have very large Muslim populations in their constituency, and they're clearly fearful that they're in danger of losing the Muslim vote, hence their support for the ceasefire. Doesn't it boil down to that?
Quite a lot of the people who voted are part of the more recent intake, so they probably haven't had a very difficult issue to contend with yet. What happens in a situation like this is that your email inbox is flooded with people. You would think the entire constituency was demanding something at times. Of course, it's usually quite an organised email campaign, and I think it does spook people. So I think there is an element of truth in what you say, Andrew. But it's also true that, you know, some people genuinely want a ceasefire. We all want to see an end to the hostilities. It's just that, you know, you have to be realistic about what that vote meant last night, and it wasn't going to advance the situation one iota.
Interesting, one of the names that leapt out at me, Steve, looking at that list, Naz Shah up in Bradford, she will be painfully aware, of course, that back in 2012, a certain George Galloway stood for respect in a by-election in her Bradford constituency. She wasn't the MP then, and won a stunning victory, and he was standing on a pledge to get British troops out of Afghanistan. Is the spectre of George Galloway and other independent Muslim candidates haunting the Labour Party today?
Well, as you say, Naz had a very tough by-election up in Bradford. I think the difficulty, as I say, is that it's easy to misread the kind of pressure that MPs are being subject to. I mean, if I was to take seriously the things that I'm hearing myself in my seat, where I actually have a relatively small Muslim population, you know, I would assume that I've got no chance of winning in the next election. I think the difficulty is that the people who purport to speak for the Muslim population in these areas are very loud, they're very organised, but they're not very representative.
Steve, let me ask you a little bit about what's been going on with the Conservative Party this week. What was your reaction to seeing David Cameron being parachuted in as Foreign Secretary?
Well, good for him, but I think it may be an act of desperation on the part of the Prime Minister.
It was what, sorry?
An act of desperation.
An act of desperation.
Do you think also, Steve, it will backfire politically because Brexiteers can't stand him because of Project Fear and all the misinformation during the referendum campaign, and a lot of Remainers can't stand him because he called the referendum in the first place and then cleared off when he didn't win the vote?
Well, you put it very well. He's symbolic of the problems that the Conservative Party have.
Right. So not a big plus then from you, Steve.
No, exactly. Well, it depends how you look at it. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage for Labour.
Let me ask you this. So we were discussing yesterday when the Supreme Court ruling did not go in the favour of the Conservative government. And that looks like that is a huge blow for Rishi Sunak. Would you want the Conservative Party to try and find a new leader now, to have another contest to find a new leader in the run-up to the election, given how unpopular he is? Would you want to see that or not?
Well, I mean, I think that's entirely up to them. I think I did see recently that a group has already met and started to organise writing in the letters to the chair of the 22 committee. So there's obviously some people in the current Conservative Party are looking for a new leader. Look, they're going to run out of candidates soon. How many Prime Ministers can you have?
You speak with one tongue in your cheek, Steve McKay, but very good to talk to you. That's Steve McKay.
Steve.
He's the Labour MP for Selly Oak.
Thank you so much.
Lots of text news coming.
I thought he'd say, no, keep him, because he's rubbish and we'll win if you've got Rishi Sunak.
I've talked to some Tory MPs yesterday. Look, I know Andrew Jenkins, she was with us yesterday. She very bravely put her head above the parapet.
They're not going to change it.
They're not going to change it. There's a lot of talk about it because they just say, that, what would the country make? We're in a cost of living crisis. They still haven't sorted it. And then the Tories have another leadership contest, which would take 3 months.
He's just very unpopular.
And whoever wins would not be ratified by the British people. They'd have to have a general election immediately.
Yeah.
They'd have to.
Well, look, let's see what you've been saying at home. Neil has said, I retired from the police in 2009. To say I'm disappointed in my old job is an understatement. I can understand the Met if they haven't got the personnel to arrest demonstrators. This is related to Palestinian demonstrators last night. But surely the legal start is actions. Are they likely to cause a breach of the police? And Tony says, I was a police officer for 32 years. Climbing on a war memorial is a public order offence. Its conduct is likely to cause a breach of the police.
Why didn't they just stop them getting up there? I don't want them banged up and charged politically, but the next thing they get away with, they'll be daubing paint all over them. Remember all the red paint painted on Churchill's statue, racist, just deeply offensive. But statue of Churchill, less offensive, but a war memorial, it's deeply offensive, Ben. I'm sorry, it is. They shouldn't do it. They shouldn't do it. There's no respect, and they've got no ability to argue their case either.
They shouldn't do it.
When Patrick Christie tried to talk to them, what did they say? Go away.
Yeah, they were
You're
just
fascists.
They just didn't want to discuss it. But
it's fascists who don't want to have a discussion of their views, not GB News.
Right, still to come this morning, Rishi Sunak says that he could tear up the UK's ties to the European human rights law to revive his Rwanda plan. We're going to ask a legal commentator, Joshua Rosenberg, how that would work. What would it mean for the small boats? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified on playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Well, Rishi's fighting back. The Supreme Court, as you know, chucked out the government's migrant plan, said it was unlawful to deport them to Rwanda, but the Prime Minister says he's pushing ahead with it anyway.
Will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. I will not allow a foreign court to block these flights. When I said I would stop the boats, I meant it.
A major Labour rebellion. Sir Keir Starmer's authority has taken a huge blow as 8 frontbenchers quit over Labour's position on a ceasefire in Gaza.
And are we in lawless Britain? Last night, pro-Palestinian protesters were allowed to climb on the Royal Artillery Memorial at Hyde Park Corner. The Met Police say they don't have the power to arrest people for doing it. I'm not sure that's right.
And fact or fiction, the final series of The Crown has been released. It shows the events leading up to Princess Diana's death in 1997, but it's received criticism for historical inaccuracies. What do you make of it?
And of course, there's a big row again. So Harry talks to his father on his birthday, his birthday.
Nice.
Progress, we think that's great. But the book's come out by their chum and mouthpiece, Omid Scobie, talking about the feud between the two brothers. So they go one step forward, 2 steps back. And Harry, of course, cooperated with the book.
Yeah, it does feel like it, doesn't it? Right, gbnews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here is your very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Lord David Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary. Video of the surprise visit to Kyiv was posted on social media, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he's grateful for the UK's support, given the world isn't focused on the war in his country. The talks address the need for weapons on the front line, strengthening air defence and protecting Ukraine's infrastructure and people.
I admire the strength and determination of the Ukrainian people. And what I want to say by being here is that we will continue to give you the moral support, the diplomatic support, the economic support, but above all, the military support that you need, not just this year and next year, but for however long it takes.
The Prime Minister insists flights to Rwanda will go ahead in the spring as planned. Rishi Sunak is looking to introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's asylum policy unlawful. The Prime Minister says he's working on a new international treaty to ensure the East African nation is deemed safe. Human rights lawyer David Hay said the government's policy is a gimmick.
If people listen to what the Supreme Court said, they effectively said that it is possible for the Rwanda policy to be lawful and for Rwanda to be a safe country, but our government didn't do their homework and didn't do their preparation. And what Rishi's effectively saying, amongst other things, is we will now go away and do that. And that, to me, is one of the issues that we need to be addressing.
The Shadow Defence Secretary says Labour isn't a party of protest and both firmness and discipline are needed. John Healey's comments come in the wake of a major rebellion over the party's position on the war in Gaza. 56 of Sir Keir Starmer's MPs rejected their leader's stance and voted for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Jess Phillips, Afzal Khan and Yasmin Qureshi are among 8 shadow ministers who have left their jobs to back an SNP motion.
I totally understand why our backbenchers want to respond to calls from their constituencies about a ceasefire. But in the end, we're not a protest party. We're doing and saying what we would do in government. That means we're backing Israel's right to defend itself after the huge Hamas terror attack, but saying, of course, this is not a blank cheque, because I hate losing people from the front bench. I know all of them, including Jess Phillips, wrestled with that very difficult decision. All of them have said they want to see Keir Starmer in Downing Street and will work with us to secure a Labour government.
Train drivers will stage a fresh round of strikes to ratchet up the pressure in their long-running dispute over pay. ASLEF union members will walk out between the 2nd and 9th of December, with different train companies affected on each day. Drivers will also refuse to work any overtime. Little progress has been made in the row, with union bosses rejecting a pay offer back in spring. Millions of women in England will soon be able to access free contraception on the high street without having to see a GP. From next month, women in England can get the pill by visiting their local pharmacy. It's part of new NHS plans to free up appointments and ease pressure on doctor surgeries. Pharmacies will need to sign up for the service. And a large fin whale has been found dead on a beach in Cornwall. It was discovered in Newquay's Fistral Beach yesterday morning by a local water sports teacher. Fin whales are the second largest mammal in the world after the blue whale. The beach has been cordoned off and authorities have urged the public to avoid the area. Abby Crosby from Cornwall Wildlife Trust told us that they're taking advantage of this opportunity.
Animals strand around our coastline all year for a variety of reasons. So whenever one does strand, although it's very sad, it's a real opportunity for us to go and examine the carcass and understand what is happening. You know, these animals are windows to the health of our seas.
This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning, it's 10:06.
Morning. We're talking about how Sir Keir Starmer has now faced a major rebellion over his stance on the Israel-Gaza war. 8 Labour shadow ministers have gone from their front bench roles because they voted for an immediate ceasefire.
Jess Phillips, Afzal Khan and Yasmin Qureshi were among the shadow ministers who left their roles to back the motion from the SNP.
So how significant is it? Let's talk now to the former editor of The Independent, Chris Blackhurst, a very fine investigative journalist. Chris, this was more than I expected. 56 MPs backed the motion calling for an immediate ceasefire. That's more than a quarter of Starmer's troops. Bigger than you thought?
Yes, much bigger, and actually almost nearly as big as the revolt against Tony Blair on the Iraq War. I mean, it is a hugely significant rebellion, and what it gets down to really is the style of Keir Starmer. For many Labour MPs, he's not Labour enough. He's too cautious. He was desperate on this issue not to be seen to be anti-Semitic because of the baggage from Jeremy Corbyn, and now this has happened, and it is very significant.
Do you take the view, Chris, that actually this will strengthen his position with the wider public because he's sticking to his guns, he's not U-turning, he's in lockstep with the government, the United States, most major governments around the world?
I think that's a tricky question. I think where Labour, in many Labour constituencies, there are many Muslims, many Arab people who feel very upset about what's going on. It's no coincidence. You look at the people who resigned last night, they're from those constituencies. There's a difference between Keir Starmer playing to the public and playing to Labour's heart. And I think there is a bit here that says other Labour leaders might have taken a different view. I'm not advocating for a second the Jeremy Corbyn view, but he's taking a very cautious line, and as it goes on, it will be very difficult. I mean, if it ends soon, well, it might be all right. But this is a rebellion that could grow.
And also, because there's absolutely no prospect of a ceasefire because Hamas aren't looking for one, Israel don't want to give one. So this war could be prolonged, which means the political difficulties for Starmer will be prolonged at the same time.
That's right. And I think where it will really kick in for Keir Starmer is if some countries around the world, countries that we regard as among our peer group, if they break ranks and really start calling for ceasefire, then he's got a big problem. I don't know how he resolves it, to be honest.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to find any sort of resolution for this. 71% of British Muslims vote Labour in most polls, 9% vote Conservative. And yet, as you say, Chris, he's also got to demonstrate that the Labour Party is no longer anti-Semitic, as it used to be, arguably, one might say, under Jeremy Corbyn. Is there anybody in his party that he can recruit to help him navigate this, who might be the person that can, you know, bring two sides together?
Yeah, you've got David Cameron on your mind. You have. I don't know. Right. I mean, look, you know, I could say Tony Blair. I mean, you know, we're into recruiting former leaders. Bring them back, you know, because the current lot can't do a decent job. I can't think who immediately springs to mind.
Well, not Tony Blair.
I don't know what Gordon Brown would say. I don't know, but we are into former leader territory. It does seem to be the flavour of the week.
Yeah. Jack Straw, maybe?
Possibly Jack Straw. I mean, he was MP for Blackburn for many years, and he was very strong on this issue. In the past, sadly, he's not you know, somebody like Frank Field, who was always regarded as a good cementer of left and right in the party. He would be good. Possibly Gordon. I mean, Gordon Brown, no one can fault his ideology in Labour, and he does talk a lot of sense within the Labour movement. I'm struggling.
Yeah, aren't we all?
But I think
Chris, I just want to ask you...
Just because the Tories have brought back their former leader doesn't mean Labour have to as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you just one quick question, Chris, because you've written this very interesting book on Manchester United and the money. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's one of Britain's richest men, lives in Monaco, of course, doesn't want to pay his taxes like the rest of us. Is he just about now to get his 25% share of Man United?
Yeah, I think the fact that yesterday we saw the resignation of the chief executive, Richard Arnold, that's paving the way for a new regime to come in, and it is a sign that something is about to happen. It is a very strange deal. I mean, you know, put it in context, he is only buying... He's buying only 25%. You'd think he was buying the whole club. He's not. 75% remains with the Glazers, who, of course, the fans hugely oppose.
Very interesting. Chris's book, of course, is Manchester United, the world's biggest cash machine. Great to talk to you again, Chris. That's Chris Black, because Manchester United is not a football team, it's an institution, isn't it?
My
it's
father would disagree with you, Andrew. My father's been a Man United fan my whole life.
Has he really?
Bred, born and bred.
But I bet
he's quite grumpy on a Saturday if they lose.
He should read that book, because he'll agree with every word of it.
Present.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I should. Yes, well
Don't
done.
say it too loud, because he might be watching.
He will be watching.
Santa Claus.
Right, pro-Palestine protest chaos broke out across London last night. They scaled some of our war memorials. They shut down major roads. GB News presenter Patrick Christie's attended the demonstration last night.
So you're saying Israel is a terrorist
and
state.
Hamas as well.
And Hamas as well.
Definitely.
Hello, mate. I'm with GB News.
Don't talk to GB News.
Quick question. Why are you here today?
Where are you from?
I'm just recording for GB News. Yep. Okay. Can I ask why you're covering your face? I just want to know why you're here today. Oh, yeah.
Go away, you're not wanted. Go away. You're absolutely not wanted. You're absolutely not wanted. Get away from here.
I just want to hear.
Get away from here. No, go away. You're fascist scum. You're not wanted.
Really? I just want to know your views, that's all.
Free Palestine.
What does Free Palestine mean?
A ceasefire.
So ceasefire now. Okay, and what do you think of...
That GB News.
The Metropolitan Police, get this, can't do anything about it. They said, while officers were on the scene quickly, we regret that they weren't there quick enough to prevent the protesters accessing the memorial. There is no law explicitly making it illegal to climb in a memorial, so officers can't automatically arrest, but they can intervene and make it clear the behaviour is not acceptable. Well, Mark White's with us, our Home and Security Editor. That's hogwash.
I think it is, yeah. I mean, I've been on many a march over the years, and I've seen people climb onto bus shelters, up lampposts, onto monuments and alike, and they've been pulled down from those structures and arrested, usually under a public order offence. And even if, you know, at the end of the day, that isn't followed through to a prosecution, it still ruins their day and stops them doing what they're doing.
Why wouldn't they be doing it then?
I don't know.
Maybe they want people like Andrew Pearce to call for more state power so the police can come in more heavy-handed, change the rules so we can't peacefully protest.
No, I don't agree with that. I think it's because the former Home Secretary is right, two-tier policing.
Well, yeah, listen, I can't put myself in the minds of these senior commanders when they do that, but there certainly seems to be something to that. If that had been
Tommy Robinson and the right-wing headbangers, they'd have pulled them off that war memorial before you could blink.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen the police be pretty robust when policing what we could call counter-demonstrators who came in, remember, after Black Lives Matter. They were, pretty hands-off in allowing Black Lives Matter to protest, to get involved in violent scuffles and alike during those protests. But then, a week or two in, when counter-protests started, they were pretty robust in going after them. And also, if we just think about what happened after Sarah Everard and the way in which those protests were handled.
They dragged those women away.
Absolutely.
And it was a peaceful protest. It was outrageous.
Can we also ask you, Mark, about events yesterday in the Supreme Court? What this means now for Rishi Sunak and the small boats? How can he overrule the ruling of yesterday?
Well, he can pass legislation which the courts will have to be cognizant of when they go forward. But to suggest that flights are going to take off by the spring, I think is pie in the sky. Because it's still going to have to be tested in the courts. You can pass the legislation. Judges will still have to sit and consider. And all of those groups who have mounted such effective cases against the government thus far are going to continue to mount cases and appeal if they lose, and it's going to go through the process.
And our very own Lee Anderson of this parish, Tory MP, said to Rishi, just ignore it. Just ignore the Supreme Court and get on and do it. But the Prime Minister made it absolutely clear in the press conference yesterday, we respect the rule of law. So it probably won't happen before the general election.
I think that's right.
Which now I think it could possibly be in the summer.
A different Prime Minister might ignore it, but I don't think it's in Rishi Sunak's character to do that. And I think most Prime Ministers in that office don't want to do something which would be seen on the international stage as effectively, flouting international norms, which we as a country were founders in actually establishing in the first place.
Mark, remind us how we used to manage perfectly well without a Supreme Court, because this is a creation of Tony Blair.
Yeah, well, we had the House of Lords, the law lords that would sit, and they were the highest court in the land at that time. So, yeah.
We didn't need a Supreme Court, did we?
Well, we seemed to manage quite well.
Just finally, so you don't think there's any chance to flights taking off? No, nor do I.
Not a hope. I can't see it.
So when he says it will, is he lying or is he just doing that magical thinking? Is it the magical thinking that Suella Braverman talks about, where he thinks he can just style it out like he did at his hedge fund manager days?
I think he's got to be seen as, from his point of view, being optimistic, in charge, determined. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's wishful thinking, because the reality of the situation as faced by the government over the last 19 months, since this policy was first announced by Boris Johnson, is that at every turn it will be challenged in the courts. And you can pass the law, which might then mean that the judges will rule in your favour, but they still have to rule, they still have to consider, and that will take time.
Yeah, OK, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. You were saying, Harry, it's 2 steps forwards and 6 steps back.
Well,
it feels a bit like that with Sunak, doesn't it, at the moment?
9 steps back.
Right, still to come, the Supreme Court said that the government's Rwanda plan is unlawful, as we've just been discussing, but Rishi Sunak insists he will press ahead. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure. So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:22. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Rishi Sunak has said that he will introduce emergency legislation to make sure that his Rwanda plan is not blocked again. He's insisted flights will be heading off in the spring as planned.
The Shadow Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey, spoke to GB News about the Rishi Sunak's press conference. This is what he had to say.
Yesterday, from the Supreme Court made clear, however, is that it isn't just a question of the European Convention on Human Rights. It's a web of international law which binds us to international rules. And, you know, at a time when it's more important than ever to be arguing for countries to observe basic human rights, abide by international law, it would be a very, very damaging step for Britain to try and step away from those long-established obligations.
So we're joined by a legal commentator, Joshua Rosenberg, now to explain this to us in a little bit more detail. Joshua, what happens now if Rishi Sunak wants to get those boats turned back or people sent to Rwanda?
The first challenge is to do this treaty with Rwanda. Now, you may say there was a deal last year. That wasn't a formal treaty. It was an informal memorandum of understanding. It wasn't enforceable. This one will be a binding treaty. It will take some time. The government says not very long, but obviously it has to be worded. It has to be signed. It would then go before Parliament. It would have to be ratified. Once that's settled, the government will apparently come forward with legislation, and the idea is that by enforcing this treaty in legislation and certain commitments in legislation, that's meant to achieve what the government wants.
And so the Supreme Court, they're not saying Rwanda's not a safe place for refugees to be housed. What they're concerned about is this odd word that most of the legislation that comes forward get around that?
The government says that Rwanda will promise not to send them away from Rwanda somewhere where they may end up where they came from, which is the country that they have fled from and where they are in danger. This is this concept of refoulement, which means sending you back to somewhere where you are in danger. And the government says this treaty will guarantee this won't happen. The problem is, and this is what the Supreme Court identified in the judgment yesterday, can the government of Rwanda control what happens on the ground? Because there were examples of deals that Rwanda has done in the past with Israel about a decade ago, which didn't work out, and the Supreme Court is not convinced that Rwanda can actually achieve this.
He also said, and we all cheered it when he said, I am not going to allow a foreign court to take to the British Parliament. Oh, fabulous, Prime Minister, at last you've got your act together. But it's not just, is it, the European Court? It's other treaties as well. That's what the Supreme Court justices said yesterday.
That's absolutely crucial. This would be a breach of human rights to send somebody back to somewhere where they face danger, no doubt about that. But it's a breach of the Refugee Convention, other international agreements. The Supreme Court said yesterday it may even be part of customary law. So even if you were to pull out of all these agreements, you wouldn't necessarily avoid your obligation, the UK government we're talking about, not to send somebody back to danger.
And if the Supreme Court comes down again and says, good try, Prime Minister, but we still don't accept it, we're rejecting it, can the British government say, thanks very much, they're getting on the next flight?
Not to the Supreme Court, because that would be a breach of the laws of the United Kingdom. But you ask about a foreign court, and what the Prime Minister seems to be talking about are these temporary orders from the Strasbourg judges. There was one last summer which blocked the flights. They're worried about one now. James Cleverly, the Home Secretary, says we've got this new understanding with the European Court, new wording for Rule 39, published earlier this week. People at the court say it simply sets out current practice. It doesn't make any real difference. But nevertheless, the government is entitled to think that maybe the court is going to think twice before blocking a flight, knowing how the Prime Minister feels about that.
But if this can be done now, if this treaty can be drawn up and passed by Parliament, why didn't Rishi Sunak do that 12 months ago and save the taxpayer a fortune in legal fees?
A very good question. They thought that if they did this informal agreement, it would be easier. Now, one of the critics of the government, writing in The Spectator yesterday, a man called Alexander Horn, said the problem with an informal memorandum of understanding is it doesn't go before Parliament, it doesn't get any scrutiny in Parliament. This treaty will be scrutinised, particularly as a specific committee in the House of Lords that scrutinises all treaties. It'll be debated, perhaps. In other words, it's much easier to get an informal agreement than it is a formal treaty, and perhaps the government thought, well, we'll cut the corners and we'll just do it that way.
This is going to take months and months and months, Joshua, and still I can't see from anything you've told us today how they're going to see off the Supreme Court.
Well, I think that's right, but it has got Rishi Sunak the headlines this morning.
Bought himself some time.
Bought himself some time. You know, otherwise the headlines would have been defeat for the government. Now the headlines are, this is a defiant Sunak vows to change laws, top court strikes down Rwanda policy, and that's the Financial Times.
Yeah.
So, in other words, you know, he's got time, he's got the prospect of winning. But you're right, it is going to take time. There will be further legal challenges. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be flights before the election.
Yeah. And I suppose politically, I mean, you're not here to talk about the politics of it, Joshua, but politically it's the British government fighting the judiciary to try and get its way on refugees.
Yes, I mean, fortunately, if I may say so, they're not being too aggressive towards the UK Supreme Court. Rishi Sunak doesn't agree, but he respects the decision of the court. They're being a little bit more aggressive to the Strasbourg court, saying we're going to take you on, but they're still not seriously suggesting pulling out of the Human Rights Convention.
We're never going to do that with David Cameron in the government.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because this asylum seekers, illegal immigration conversation, however you want to define those people, has changed in recent times from being one about morality to being one about legality. It seems people very rarely hear politicians anymore talking about the morality of this issue. In your experience and in your vast knowledge of the law, what would you do? What can we do that is within the law? Can we turn back the boats? That's one proposal we often hear, particularly from the Reform Party.
I suppose this may be a cop-out, but I might say I wouldn't have started from here. If there is only one country in the world, which it appears, is willing to take asylum seekers from the UK, and if there were others, presumably the government would have found one, and if that country has a dubious record, as the Supreme Court has said, maybe it's time to think this is not the policy. If this policy has not deterred the boat people over the past year, which it has not, apparently, then maybe you need to think of something else.
Do you have any ideas?
I mean, I think that Keir Starmer is talking about bringing in a limited number of people and having an agreement with France whereby we'll take some, but not everybody, and France can enforce that sort of agreement. I don't know how practical that is. But this policy is running into difficulties.
My heart sank when I heard somebody close to number 10 saying, we're going to find another country. I just thought, no, please, we can't.
No. And they haven't, have they?
Quite.
No.
I mean, maybe that's a political decision. Maybe there isn't anywhere else.
Suella Bradman, I'm told, was thinking about the Falkland Islands. What did they do to deserve it? Mrs Thatcher liberated them from the dreaded Galtieri.
Quite so.
The last thing is Lundy Island occupied.
Well, the Ascension Islands, joking, is one that is often brought up as somewhere that people could at least be processed. What would the legalities of that be, Joshua?
Well, I've been to Ascension on the way to the Falkland Islands many years ago, and Ascension has all sorts of security aspects. You know, it's a listening station, it's a BBC base, it's a military base, it's an air base. May not be entirely suitable, and there's nothing there. And the UK doesn't control it. Falklands, again, I mean, British Overseas Territory is it, but you can't actually insist. It has a measure of self-government. And also, it's very expensive to send people there.
Yeah. What a mess.
Looks like it's still a
Thank you,
complicated
Joshua.
method. Joshua always makes it seem
And I think all there is on Lundy Island are a few puffins and one pub.
Right. I'm not suggesting, by the way, if you live on the Lundy Island, I'm just saying in there, don't want to start
to all of
a
our
social
viewers
media war.
On the Lundy Island.
Yeah. Now, back to the trenches. David Cameron has started country hopping already. He's on his first official visit to Ukraine as Foreign Secretary. It doesn't take long,
What a surprise. He went to Ukraine. Straight to voicemail. Prince Harry and the King plan another phone call for next week. That's nice, in what's been described as a turning point in their relationship. I guess Charles can always mute it if he's moaning on. That and much of your morning, and much more. I've got to learn to talk this morning. I need more coffee. Here's Sophia Wensler with your news.
It's 10:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Lord David Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary. Video of the surprise visit to Kyiv was posted on social media, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he's grateful for the UK's support, given the world isn't focused on the war in his country. The talks addressed the need for weapons on the front line, strengthening air defence and protecting Ukraine's infrastructure and people. The Prime Minister insists flights to Rwanda will go ahead in the spring as planned. Rishi Sunak is looking to introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's asylum policy is unlawful. The Prime Minister says he's working on a new international treaty to ensure the East African nation is deemed safe. Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Labour isn't a party of protest. His comments come in the wake of a major rebellion on the war in Gaza. 56 of Sir Keir Starmer's MPs rejected their leader's position, which called for a pause in fighting between Israel. 10 shadow ministers and parliamentary aides quit or were sacked so they could vote for an SNP motion, demanding an immediate ceasefire. The carcass of a fin whale, which was found washed up on a beach in Cornwall, is being removed and destroyed as investigations into its death continue. It was discovered on Newquay's Fistral Beach yesterday. Cornwall Wildlife Trust says examining the remains offers a window of opportunity to better understand the health of the ocean. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2402 and 1.1431 euros. The price of gold is £1,586 and 19 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,453 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, Lord Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary today. What a surprise. Why do you think he went there? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 10:38. You're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The noise is off on the side was Cara Malone, of course, who comes in talking. She can't help herself.
You can't help yourself. You just tell me gossip.
Stop.
She comes in with a kerfuffle. It's always a kerfuffle.
And I had to inspect her teeth because she's got.
I've just had a croissant.
Right,
well, I haven't got mine in today. I can't form a sentence.
Thanks for sharing with us, Carol.
Right,
very nice.
Let's start with these. Oh, Sam Lister's here as well.
Yes, lovely Sam.
Political the Express is here. Right, let's start with these protests last night. Pro-Palestinian outside Downing Street. This was Patrick Christie's show. It's on 9 o'clock now during the week. Here it is.
Watch this.
He's saying Israel is a terrorist.
And Hamas as well.
And Hamas as well.
Definitely.
Hello, mate. I'm with GB News.
Don't talk to GB News.
Quick question. Why are you here today?
Where are you from?
I'm just going for GB News. Okay. Can I ask why you're covering your face? I just want to know why you're here today. Oh, yeah. Go away. Go away. You're not wanted. Go away. You're absolutely not wanted. You're absolutely not wanted. Get away from here. I just want to get away from here. No, go away. You're fascist scum. You're not wanted. Really? I just want to know your views. That's all.
Free Palestine.
What does free Palestine mean?
A ceasefire.
So ceasefire now. Okay. And what do you think?
From the GBNews.
The irony is not lost on these morons that they're demonstrating outside Houses of Parliament, one of the oldest democracies, the cradle of democracy in the world, and they're saying, we won't talk to you, we won't engage with you. They are cretins.
I mean, when people shove the phrase around fascist scum, it always makes me laugh, because if you'd pinned him down and said, tell me what you think a fascist actually is, they wouldn't have a clue. But, I mean, these are the groups that advocate free speech, yet here they are saying the GB News viewers and GB News itself can't be listened to.
But also, they're incapable of articulating a proper philosophy and why they're there.
But, you know, the same mob was also down, it was at the War Memorial last night in Hyde Park, climbing all over that. We were told this would not happen. Cops told us they would... Mark Rowley, the chief of police, said this would not happen. And there they were, and cops were standing idly by while they clambered all over.
Unfortunately, the girl who did go to talk to Patrick, somebody put her hand over the camera. No doubt, Sam, some people in that crowd would have wanted the opportunity to have their thoughts heard on a national news station, international news station. But that sense of we're not going to discuss it, we're just here with our emotion, is so depressing in 2023.
It is. I mean, I've always firmly believed if you have a very strong view on something, you should be able to argue it.
Yeah.
And if you can't argue it, you've
100%.
lost, really. I think it's very depressing. I mean, I did end up kind of accidentally walking through the protest last night.
Did they call you fascist scum?
No, they didn't, because I had my pass firmly hidden. So,
Daily Express.
It was a big protest, given that it was a kind of impromptu one late at night. But I think the stuff that's happened at the Senate House, this is the kind of thing that Suella Braverman was talking about.
Two-tier policing.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is the thing that's made so many people so angry, that they want to see police acting on these occasions. They get very angry when they see them just standing back, and that's part of the frustration that we've got at the moment.
Now, you were in the press conference last night, a bird's-eye view of you on your phone, I think, while the Prime Minister was talking. Was he that boring? And it was a bravura performance, wasn't it? And he really went for it, and he's fighting back. It's for the birds. There's no boats going to go any time soon.
I think... I mean, I would lay £50 on no flight ever taking off to Rwanda.
Yeah.
Ever. I know the Prime Minister would heavily dispute that, but I think we're just going to go round and round and round in this legal quagmire. Even if you introduce emergency legislation, I don't think that probably is enough to satisfy all the courts, the Supreme Court, the European Court in Strasbourg.
The UN.
Yeah, exactly. And so, actually, I think... It doesn't matter, the Prime Minister has good intentions, but you have to start delivering on this. He's got very limited time to deliver on it. People are very, very frustrated. And he couldn't explain to me. I asked him, can you explain to me how you're going to defy the European courts? He said, I'm not going to take any orders off a foreign court. But he couldn't tell me
what
how,
a soundbite.
How
He's done nothing but that. Carol, do you think we're going to get back any of our 140 million quid we've already given to Rwanda?
No, I don't. But, I mean, I don't think that's the main thing. I think that what Sam's just talked about, what he was saying yesterday was unequivocated twaddle. He is not going to do it. Suella was absolutely right about it. He's weak. He's lying now, again, to the British people about what he's going to do. Because the bottom line is he would have to leave the ACHR in its entirety and all of the treaties
well,
that
he
were
could say
cited.
he said you can absent yourself from it on this particular aspect, not by putting a notwithstanding into the legislation.
To people who know today. A lot of experts are saying you have to leave the ACHR in its entirety. You have to also abandon all the treaties as well.
Well, let's do that then.
Cited yesterday, and we know he's not going to do that. No. He now has a Home Secretary who has said that we should not leave the ACHR.
And a Foreign Secretary will never.
Which is but you know what gets me is that I think it's finished for him now. I think what happened this week, his joke of a cabinet and that joke of a speech yesterday, completely confirms everything Suella has said about him. You know, and my question is, OK, the judges have ruled on this, but should judges have the power to determine policy? And my answer to that is no. They were making a judgment on something that happened in Europe, European law, not on British law. And a democracy should have the right to determine who does and who doesn't come into its country. And we are being denied the right to do that. And Sunak is shouting, oh, we're not going to let a foreign court decide this. But we are, as long as we're in the ECHR.
But I think it doesn't even matter about the ECHR, because how's he ever going to get the Supreme Court on side? They have made their mind up that Rwanda cannot be trusted to send people back to the country from where they came. So how is he ever going to get round that?
Well, that's it. And the court relied heavily on evidence from the UN High Commission on Refugees.
Who have, by the way, sent refugees to Rwanda.
And have completely, and said clearly it has an exemplary record with refugees.
But also, it has been against this policy in the UK from the start. So it's hard tonight to not look at this and think that there is something more political. I don't think the court is political, but I think the UN's input there is political, and to rely on that is something that upsets a lot of Conservative MPs and also experts in this area. So I think that's a problem. So actually, if you go through the court process again, what's to stop the UN doing something similar again and the court relying on that again? We go back to square one.
Know that Rwanda isn't a safe country. Britain cannot be held responsible for the world's problems. We can't legislate on what we think might happen to someone if they get sent back to their own country. Alistair Heath did a really good piece in the Telegraph today, and he's talking about this refoulement principle. He said it only made sense after the Second World War, and it was supported by the right and the left of all parties all over Europe because it was to protect refugees who were in Europe. He's saying it doesn't make sense now. It's not fit for purpose anymore. It's just not. And I think he's right. And yet we're basing our policy, our ability to get rid of these migrants on something that was only designed for refugees during the Second World War.
But there is... Sorry.
I would say, what about these Tory MPs? Because the mood was sulphurous yesterday, wasn't it? He's bought himself a bit of time, but they know in their hearts, don't they? It's not going to happen.
It's this on top of Suella Braverman, the sacking. And it's not so much really the individual. It's not so much actually about Suella herself. It's about the symbol, the reshuffle, the removal of that big figure on the right in the cabinet. There is no longer a big figure of a similar kind of status to her from the right in the cabinet. So you put all that together and then you put it together with the Rwanda judgment, which now is very unlikely a flight will take off. And those MPs on the right, those who represent Red Wall, they were incredibly frustrated. They feel very depressed. One told me that the reshuffle had essentially guaranteed that they would lose their seat. And they're very, very...
But do they feel strongly enough to change him, to kick him out?
No.
Yeah,
So it's a busted flush?
They lost the Red Wall at a stroke in sacking Suella. And what it tells me is the people in government have no idea about the people they govern. They have no idea how they think.
Do you not think perhaps Malone, Rishi's already decided, what was it we said the other day? He'd already decided Sunderland is lost. He's now trying to
giving up on Sunderland.
Sorry.
Trying to
you know what it is? I think he knows it's over. I think he knows it's finished. If he had any gumption about him, he'd go to the country now and get it over with, because this is just going to be a torturous year, and things are going to get worse and worse. But he doesn't have the guts, and that tells me he doesn't care about this country. He cares about what happens to him next.
I agree.
And that really.
And I've said before, and he'll always have 6 houses in 6 countries across the world. But at what point, Carol, do those MPs who are sitting beneath him say, would they agree with us? Like you say, a lot of MPs know that they've lost their seat. Don't you just throw everything you can at it now and put somebody else in the position? Because if you're giving up, you're giving up.
Well, he is giving up, It's interesting, all the polls yesterday, radio stations, TV stations doing polls with real people, proper people, the people who matter in this country, and all of them said it was a mistake to sack Suella. It was a huge mistake. And the fact that Rishi couldn't see that, the fact he couldn't see what the repercussions of what was going to happen, tells me he shouldn't be there. He's exactly what I hoped wasn't the case. But he is a manager and not a leader.
Absolutely.
But it's too late to change him. And even the people who were frustrated with him.
Why?
Because you cannot change a leader a year out from an election when you've had a new leader last year,
but
2 new leaders last year.
Give up now.
No, because you can't have a fourth Prime Minister
it would be
without an immediate
you would have to go immediately.
Throw everything at it. Just put your head above the parapet and actually do something and represent the people who put you there.
And there's also there's no figure to step into that role now.
No, Suella would have been great. The public would have voted for it.
But the MPs won't. That's the thing. The MPs won't.
Well, then they're going to leave their suits, lose their seats, and they will only have themselves to
blame. What do you make
of
David Cameron coming back? He's in Ukraine already.
You know what? When I I heard that on Tuesday, I thought it was a joke. You know, this is the guy who, when the Brexit vote happened, he didn't see it coming for a start.
Yeah.
And as soon as it came, he scarpered and ran away from his responsibilities immediately. And then in 2021, it was revealed, we discovered that he'd taken £7.5 million from the Greensill Finance Company to lobby his political contacts to make money.
Including Rishi Sunak, by the way.
Including Rishi Sunak. And today, you know, he's been told to declare all his interest in China. You know, the bombs are going to keep dropping with him over the next few months. And this is a guy who cannot do his job properly. He can't go to the Commons. He can't talk in the Commons. He can't be held accountable in there. So what on earth is the point of him? If this is his safe pair of hands, it shows you this is desperation, not innovation.
I wish I'd taken a bet, Sam, on where he was going to go first. I knew he'd go to Ukraine. That unwavering support for Ukraine is a prerequisite of being part of the liberal intellectual elite. We should have known he'd end up there.
Yeah. Well, I think he's more, you know, to needle Boris, to be honest. But
that's a very good
point. Boris, obviously, his legacy is Ukraine, and the first trip
he messed up a peace deal in Ukraine, didn't he, Boris, when he went out there? Weren't they quite close to reaching some sort of resolution? I think that might just be terrible gossip, but I don't think he did any good when Boris went there, did he?
They love him out there, you know. I
didn't stop the bombs.
No.
I'm not sure that was within his power to do that, if I'm honest.
What was he doing there?
Record on foreign policy. Look at the basket case he created in Libya, because we sent troops in there with France, and the part of the big migration problem across the whole of Northern Africa now is because Libya is now a basket case.
But this is the thing, it's Libya, there's Syria, he lost the vote in Syria.
He did, tried to bomb Syria, and the Commons voted against it.
And he has a litany of failures from his time in government. But the thing is, people keep saying the grown-ups are back, the grown-ups are back.
No.
What that means is somebody who looks right, sounds like right, kind of doesn't scare the horses.
Yes.
But actually, that covers an enormous amount of failure on foreign policy and on domestic policy.
And of course, he's not a threat because he's in the Lords.
He'll achieve nothing. Cleverly, who's never achieved anything in his political career at all. And the only qualification he has is that he doesn't want Rishi's job. That's why he's there. And he's compliant.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that. He's got no chance of doing it.
Shall we do quickly? Let's talk about Harry and King Charles. It's nice, Carol, that they had a chat on his birthday.
Do you know what? Omid Scobie is the person who's putting all this out and about with it. And I don't believe a single word he says because he's Meghan and Harry's lackey. But you know, they're talking about this being this is the start of a new relationship. Well, no, it isn't. He rang up his dad to say happy birthday. He's still bleating about the fact he wasn't invited to the birthday party on Tuesday, which was at Clarence House. Now, why on earth did he think he would be? But Scobie today is also saying that even though he's talking to his dad and there might be a way back there, I think he's only talking to his dad, you know, because I think his marriage is on the rocks and he's realising he's got no
evidence for that, Carol, of course.
No, there is no evidence, but I mean, we just know they're very rarely seen together now. They don't do much together anymore. But anyway, and my feeling is that he's just thinking, he's seen what LA's like, he doesn't want to be there, so he's thinking, I might make a few little inroads back into the
We don't want him back.
Well,
particularly he's going to bring that wife back.
Scobie's new book's coming out soon, and that's about how the relationship between Harry and Wilson is completely and forever broken. Well,
so that, I mean, the book with Omid Scobie, Harry has cooperated with this book. How can he ever rebuild his relationship when another book detailing warts and all the problems in the royal family? The end game,
I think that is really difficult, but I really hope that they do, because I think genuinely, I think families should always try and rebuild relationships. It's never too late. I mean, I would hope that.
Quite different if you've made about £20 million on the back of slagging off your family.
I know, I really do get that, but I just think...
a chat with Oprah Winfrey. Yeah. I mean, how many... Is it 20 million he's made slagging off his family?
It's a dysfunctional family, isn't it? And I think probably, you know, when you've got to book an appointment to speak to your dad on the phone, it's a different world, you know?
It's very English, isn't it? That I hate you, I've thrown you under the bus, but I'll ring you on your birthday. If you want to speak to him,
And of course, he leaked it that he's speaking to his father too. So
I know there's not many redeeming features, but I just think, you know, it would be good if they kind of reconcile.
And William, according to the book, regards his brother as the defector.
Well, I mean, he is a defector, but more importantly, he's a nasty defector. And where do we think that came from? That came from Harry too. That didn't come from Wills.
Yeah.
Nothing Scobie says has come from the royal family, so you know it's all come from Meghan.
From Meghan,
and it's just going to, from Meghan. So nothing that he says matters, I don't think, anymore. But I love her optimism. It's just like ridiculous.
I love you. What a happy ending.
Happy ending, yeah.
But It's what we do, isn't it, with the royal family?
thinks
They're
it's a
our little
fairy tale.
doll's house.
It's a sweet fairy tale.
And we take them out, we play with them, and we project storylines onto them. And I'd like a happy ending.
It'd be a good ending for the next series of The Crown, wouldn't it?
Hello again, Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Ahead of a drier day for many of us tomorrow, we have quite a bit of rain around today, the heaviest of which is in association with an area of low pressure which is tracking its way eastwards just to the south of the UK, but it does clear away, and so the heaviest, most persistent rain will also clear away from the southeast as we go through the afternoon. Quite a cloudy picture following in behind, some lingering mist and fog across far northern parts, but also the best of any sunshine likely for northern Scotland, and then a heavy band of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland too. Could be some thunder mixed in with this. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, just about getting into double figures towards the south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we are going to see then that band of rain pushing its way eastwards across many parts of England and Wales, and also Scotland could be a little bit heavy for some of us. Ahead of it, some low temperatures likely and a bit of mist and fog quite likely towards the northeast of Scotland, and behind it clearer skies allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, so there could be a touch of frost around first thing Friday morning, but also some patches of fog or freezing fog. Friday itself, though, looks like a largely dry day. Plenty of sunshine on offer. Any rain will quickly clear away towards the east, and then apart from a few showers, most likely towards western areas, which will ease through the day, it is looking largely dry, with a good deal of sunshine around before some wet and windy weather arrives later, pushing its way into the weekend. Temperatures for many a touch higher than today. Bye-bye.
Well, still to come. Will he try to appease the Tory right? Rishi Sunak taking the nuclear option and leaving the European Convention on Human Rights? Hope so, but I doubt it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 16th of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Rishi is fighting back. The Supreme Court said that the government's migrant plan was unlawful, but Rishi Sunak is ploughing on and vows to find a way around the ruling.
Major Labour rebellion. Sir Keir Starmer's authority has taken a bit of a blow. A quarter of Labour MPs rebelled and called for a ceasefire in the Commons last night.
And is it tasteless TV? The new season of The Crown has been recreated. It's recreated Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed's final moments before their fatal car crash in Paris in 1997. Do you think that this tragedy should be dramatised? Have you watched any of The Crown?
I have, and I've given up on The Crown, to be honest, because I got fed up with the historical inaccuracies. I mean, it's a drama, so
yeah.
They can take liberties with facts, of course, but I just found it too irritating. But I've got to say, the actress playing Diana, it is uncanny.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
It is like watching Princess Diana. So that's an interesting debate, because, of course, it has taken huge historical liberties. Does it matter?
Yeah, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here is your very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Lord David Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary. Video of the surprise visit to Kyiv was posted on social media, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he's grateful for the UK's support, given the world isn't focused on the war in his country. The talks address the need for weapons on the front line, strengthening air defence and protecting Ukraine's infrastructure and people.
I admire the strength and determination of the Ukrainian people. And what I want to say by being here is that we will continue to give you the moral support, the diplomatic support, the economic support, but above all, the military support that you need, not just this year and next year, but for however long it takes.
The Prime Minister insists flights to Rwanda will go ahead in the spring as planned. Rishi Sunak is looking to introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's asylum policy is unlawful. The Prime Minister says he's working on a new international treaty to ensure the East African nation is deemed safe. Human rights lawyer David Hay says the government's policy is a gimmick.
If people listen to what the Supreme Court said, they effectively said that it is possible for the Rwanda policy to be lawful and for Rwanda to be a safe country, but our government didn't do their homework and didn't do their preparation. And what Rishi's effectively saying, amongst other things, is we will now go away and do that. And that, to me, is one of the issues that we need to be addressing.
The Shadow Defence Secretary says Labour isn't a party of protest and both firmness and discipline are needed. John Healey's comments come in the wake of a major rebellion over the party's position on the war in Gaza. 56 of Sir Keir Starmer's MPs rejected their leader's stance and voted for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Jess Phillips, Afzal Khan and Yasmin Qureshi are among 8 shadow ministers who have left their jobs to back an SNP motion.
I totally understand why our backbenchers want to respond to calls from their constituencies about a ceasefire. But in the end, we're not a protest party. We're doing and saying what we would do in government. That means we're backing Israel's right to defend itself after the huge Hamas terror attack, but saying, of course, this is not a blank check. I hate losing people from the front bench. I know all of them, including Jess Phillips, wrestled with that very difficult decision. All of them have said they want to see Keir Starmer in Downing Street and will work with us to secure a Labour government.
Police could be handed new powers to protect war memorials after pro-Palestinian protesters were accused of desecrating a monument. A group of people climbed on the Royal Artillery Memorial in London following a march outside Parliament last night. Home Secretary James Cleverly told broadcasters the behaviour was abusing and deeply offensive, and he will examine whether the law should be changed. The Met Police says while it's unacceptable, no laws were broken. Israel's president says a strong force may need to stay in Gaza, despite President Biden's comments that occupation would be a big mistake. It's after Israeli forces raided Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, saying they found weapons of terror infrastructure belonging to Hamas. The terror group denies the claim. The US President Joe Biden says he made it clear to Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, that a two-state solution to Israel-Palestine conflict is the only answer. Train drivers will stage a fresh round of strikes to ratchet up the pressure in their long-running dispute over pay. ASLEF union members will walk out between the 2nd and 9th of December, with different train companies affected on each day. Drivers will also refuse to work any overtime. Little progress has been made in the row, with union bosses rejecting a pay offer back in spring. Millions of women in England will soon be able to access free contraception on the high street without having to see a GP. From next month, women in England can get the pill by visiting their local pharmacy. It's part of new NHS plans to free up appointments and ease pressure on doctor surgeries. Pharmacies will need to sign up to the service. The carcass of a fin whale, which was found washed up on a beach in Cornwall, is being removed and destroyed as investigations into its death continue. It was discovered on Newquay's Fistral Beach yesterday. The public has been urged to avoid the area. Abby Crosby from Cornwall Wildlife Trust told us that they're taking advantage of this opportunity.
Animals strand around our coastline all year for a variety of reasons. So whenever one does strand, although it's very sad, it's a real opportunity for us to go and examine the carcass and understand what is happening. You know, these animals are windows to the health of our seas.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 11:06. Ooh, you're in position. Right, let's see what you've been saying at home. Robert has said if Sunak had any intention of stopping immigration or putting Britain first, he wouldn't have sacked Suella Braverman. This is in relation, of course, to all the events this week. It's been a heck of a week.
Yeah,
we're exhausted, aren't we, today?
And she has not finished, because she's had her say in that extraordinary resignation. I've never seen one like that before, but she'll make a major speech at some point. She'll do a major interview, maybe in one of the Sunday papers.
Yes.
And she is on the warpath, because I think she pretty much saw what happened in the Supreme Court yesterday. She warned him, the Prime Minister.
She did. The fact that he sacked her, so she got to write the letter, so when the result came in, it looked like his fault. He couldn't have timed it worse. We're talking also about these protests last night in Westminster. These are going to go on and on and on until that Middle Eastern war is sorted out. And Ken has said, good morning, both. Great show. Thank you, Ken. I love you to bits, Bev. Likewise. But you're on the wrong on this one. As a former soldier, our war memorials automatically become a family memorial, reflecting our camp comrades past and present who've fallen in the line of duty. Yeah. And I get that. I'm not saying I don't understand how utterly disrespectful, stupid and immoral it is to stand on those monuments.
And they're young people who haven't got a clue about our history. And Barbara says, I'm deeply offended by these moronic protesters climbing over the Royal Artillery Memorial. My father served in that regiment for over 30 years and lost friends in various conflicts around the world. And this isn't a memorial for those who served. He's now in his 90s. I wonder now if his service was worth it, if it can be so disrespected by people who can't even articulate their arguments in a rational, logical way.
Yeah.
Brilliantly put, Barbara.
Absolutely, beautifully put, Barbara. But the other thing I would say is, in a free democracy with free speech, we have to have the right to be offended, even if it's by stupid young people who don't know anything standing on monuments.
Shouting at Patrick Christie, go away, you're fascist scum. It's fascist scum who don't allow freedom of speech.
Completely.
It's fascist scum who ban democratic discourse. And they were saying this outside the Houses of Parliament. The irony not lost on these morons.
Do you know what is interesting? I mentioned it the other day, though, when we were talking about free speech and censorship. My children's school and friends of their schools, I've asked loads of kids who've been in the house in the last couple of weeks, have you been discussing the Middle Eastern conflict at school? And not one school has gone near it. And that just shows how emotional and how incendiary this issue is, but I still think it's sad that people aren't discussing it, and then we're not educating kids that there can be two sides.
And they should, but also, in the run-up to Remembrance Weekend, do they talk about the poppy in schools?
Not enough.
Yeah.
They did lots of stuff on Diwali. They didn't do an awful lot on the poppies. They didn't do an awful lot on the memorial. And in fact, there was a bit of a survey, wasn't it, that showed how few young people know what the Memorial Weekend and Remembrance Sunday was actually about. So it starts at schools. Let's encourage conversation.
Yeah. Now, the government says it's going to introduce emergency legislation, we heard this before, to deem Rwanda as a safe country and end the legal challenges.
Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, was on Patrick's show last night. Let's have a listen to what he said.
We are unanimously of the view that they were entitled to reach that conclusion. The changes needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, but they have not been shown to be in place now. The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
Mr. Speaker, it's very straightforward. He promised that he would stop the boats this year. Yeah. This year.
Now, the keen-eyed amongst you will have noticed that that was not Lee Anderson. That was Lord Peel, I think, yesterday. Lord Reid?
Lord Reid.
Reid.
And that was Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, making another useless intervention in the Commons. But we were hoping to listen to Lee Anderson, but we haven't got him, so we're going to
paraphrase. Shall I paraphrase for you? Because I watched it. Lee Anderson basically said we should be turning people back on the day that they arrive. They should be sent straight back to where they came from.
He also said, ignore the Supreme Court and just put them on the planes now. But we know that's not going to happen. Let's go to our political editor, Chris Hope, who's in Whitehall, Westminster, for the latest. Chris.
Andrew and Bev, yes, indeed. We heard that. We know what Lee Anderson thinks. Get the planes take off as soon as they can. I've got with me now a former Attorney General known to many viewers from the Brexit wars, as I describe them, Sir Geoffrey Cox. I'll bring him in now on his view on what happened yesterday. Sir Geoffrey Cox, were the judges right, do you think, to reject this plan for Rwanda?
Well, the judges rejected it on the basis of evidence that it said that the first instance court, had not properly considered. Evidence that related to the grounds for believing that there might possibly be the return of refugees, asylum seekers to countries of their origin, which would obviously be unsafe.
So the concern would be about people sent here from the UK to Rwanda, where would they be sent after that country? So you weren't surprised by the ruling at all?
Well, on the face of the evidence, no. I mean, the judges were very clear that there was sufficient evidence to give grounds for them to believe that there would be a risk of what is called refoulement, and I think on the evidence that judgment can't be faulted. What matters now is, can those concerns be addressed? I think they possibly can. The Prime Minister's set out what I think sounds like a perfectly coherent plan. A lot will depend on the detail, both of the treaty and the bill he proposes, but it's a perfectly coherent way forward, and I'm delighted the Prime Minister has now decided to grip this very important issue.
And you think his idea can work to upgrade a memorandum of understanding with Rwanda to a full-blown treaty and pass it through the building behind you, Parliament, in, say, 40 or so days, and then maybe the first flights take off as late as May, he said last night in Number 10?
Well, it's difficult for me to anticipate or predict a timetable. What I'm saying is that the programme that he set out of a treaty, and the content of that treaty will be important. It must clearly have further safeguards. The fact it's a treaty itself will answer one objection that the Supreme Court had, which is that it was an unenforceable memorandum of understanding. But there must be more in that treaty to address the facts. But once those facts have been changed, once there are additional safeguards, I think it's perfectly legitimate for Parliament to be the institution that decides. It's the supreme lawmaking authority in this country. And I think the Prime Minister is right to say that it should decide. Now, you're quite right, of course, Chris. Whether the House of Lords seeks to impede its progress, whether it objects and whether it bogs it down is another matter. But I think the Prime Minister is setting out probably the only plan available to him.
I mean, the peers might object to the fact that the 5 courts have ruled unanimously against the plan. The government's response is to change the law and force them to accept it. And peers behind you in that building might object to that.
Well, that isn't, of course, all that's being proposed. Now, I would agree if that was all that was being proposed. It would be quite wrong, I think, just to declare black as white and say that on the same facts we can say that this country is safe. But that is not what I understand the government's plan to be. The plan is to address some of these concerns, both in the treaty and outside it. There are plenty of ways of doing it. Imaginative ways were found in the withdrawal agreement after Brexit by setting up a commission that looks after and protects the rights of EU citizens here. Well, if we can find imaginative solutions inside a treaty that changes the facts, I can't see a real substantial objection to the Prime Minister's proposals, but a lot will depend on the detail.
But of course, you're an MP, you're a leading lawyer, leading barrister, but also an MP for many years standing in the West Country. How important is it that Mr Sunak gets this through and gets these flights taken off before the next election?
Look, there's a crisis of confidence in the entire system, and we can't simply turn away from it. The government is addressing the problem in multiple ways. It's reduced by 20,000 those coming across the channel. It's reduced the backlog by 40, 50,000. It's making real progress, but we have to seize this nettle. And there is a political crisis of confidence that needs to be addressed, and it can only be addressed, I think, by the Prime Minister putting this to Parliament, both in the form of a treaty and in the form of a bill saying that this must now happen. And the courts, faced with primary legislation, would respect it.
As a lawyer, as a former Attorney General, though, why now? Why is Plan B emerging now? Why not do all this a year ago, as maybe Suella Braverman and Boris Johnson have been saying for a while?
Well, I think it was perfectly reasonable to see whether or not the existing arrangements that had been reached with Rwanda would suffice. But I agree with the implication of your question. I am troubled that the court identified serious weaknesses in the approach of the Home Office a year or so ago to the preparation of its case. For example, the country policy information notes were regarded as inadequate by the Supreme Court. That's the guidance that exists in connection with Rwanda. It hadn't looked sufficiently at the practicalities of the asylum system there. It hadn't looked at the previous experience with Israel. So I agree that there were shortcomings there, which I'm surprised at. But there's no reason why we shouldn't address them now. The treaty may very well be able to tackle many of those concerns and change the balance of the equation. I hope it will. We have to remember, Chris, that the Lord Chief Justice decided in his view that this was acceptable and lawful. We can't be far away when distinguished judges reach different conclusions, and I think the time has now come, Prime Minister has plainly decided that, to grasp this nettle.
And has he got it in him? The Daily Mail today says his eyes are burning with coal and with fury about this. You know the guy, he's your leader. Can he get this over the line?
I think he's slow to anger, but we saw at certain points in the leadership election that when the fire started, he's capable of sparking into energy and life. He's a very competent, I think very reasonable, very moderate man, but I think he has the bit between his teeth. And I say good luck to him, and I shall certainly support him. It will depend on the detail of the treaty. It will depend on the bill. But I think it's a recipe that could work.
And one final question to you, Sir Geoffrey. In one word, will flights take off for Rwanda before the next election?
You're asking me to bet. I think there's a good chance. That's not one word, that's 4 or 5. But I think there's a good chance if we seize this nettle, grip it, and move forward swiftly.
Well, Geoffrey Cox, thank you for joining us today on GB News. And as we heard there, seizing the nettle is what Sir Geoffrey Cox thinks Mr Sunak must try and do. He thinks he can see some fire in his belly. Let's wait and see. Over to you. Back to you, Andrew and Bev.
Really interesting, Chris.
Yeah,
Chris, thanks for that. Geoffrey Cox is a very formidable figure, a brain the size of a planet. I don't know when he quite fits in being an MP, because I think his average earnings as a barrister on the side of being an MP around £900,000 a year. Very nice too. He's a very clever man.
Good for him.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
Now, second time lucky. Here is the clip of GB News presenter Lee Anderson reacting to the Rwanda ruling.
We need to make sure that the laws, and Rishi said we're going to change the law, more legislation to make it watertight. But here's the thing, Patrick. The people in Ashfield, the people in this country are fed up to the back teeth of these illegal migrants coming over this country, taking the mick, they're stopping in hotels, they're costing us an absolute fortune. And I've always said, I've been consistent from day one, we should send them back the same day. If we did that, they'd stop coming.
So you are doubling down on your comments earlier, ignore the law, get the flights taken
I've never
off.
changed my mind on this from day one. They should be sent back the same day.
Well, I completely agree with him, and it's just a pity we didn't. And then the European Court could have got their proverbials in a twist, so what?
Right, still to come this morning, the final season of Netflix royal drama The Crown opens in 1997. It's on the cusp of one of the most analysed periods in recent history. But is it fact or fiction? We're going to be discussing that. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
11:22 with Britain's News and on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the first half of the final season of The Crown is being launched this week. Let's have a look at what is in store.
Don't really understand how I ended up here. Dashing around. And losing sight of myself in the process. You know, I think that's been the story of my whole life.
That makes me
haunting, isn't it?
Goosebumps with how realistic the voice and the body language is.
Extraordinary. Well, joining us in the studio is our royal correspondent Cameron Walker and the former royal correspondent son Charles Ray. Charles, I want to talk to you first. Charles, you knew Diana well. You talked to her, you saw her. The likeness of Elizabeth Debicki, the actress playing her, is uncanny.
It is uncanny, and she's the best one of the lot that have played Diana so far. So there's no question about the fact that she's very, very alike and has managed to get the man.
And Charles, you covered it when the princess was killed in that crash, the love story, or whether it wasn't a love story. Is it legitimate for it to be a big part of the Netflix programme?
I'm hesitating because there have been other films, other dramas, which have shown people have died. So I suppose that part of it is how it's shown is the problem.
Cameron Walker, you've seen some of this. How delicately do they manage this really tricky storyline of the death of Princess Diana?
I think it's as sensitive as it possibly could be when you are portraying dramatically the death of somebody in a car crash. So I know it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but they do not show Diana dead. And they do not show the crash itself or even the aftermath of a mangled up car, if you've seen that news footage from the time. What they do show is the outside of the tunnel, the car speeding into the tunnel, and then the sound of the crash. But there is no gory details. It is as sensitively done as I think they possibly could do.
Charles, I was going to ask you, there's going to be the usual fuss, and one of the reasons I stopped watching The Crown, Charles, I just got fed up with the fact that so many things didn't happen the way it's portrayed. But, of course, I have to pinch myself and remind myself it's a drama. It's not meant to be an historical account.
You're absolutely right, Andrew, and I'm furious because I've seen the first part, and there is a part where she comes out to a boat that I was on, and I'm annoyed that I'm being portrayed by Robert Redford or Brad Pitt. But to be serious, they have distorted that event out of all context. I mean, she comes across like some brassiere model and says, "Hello, boys." That didn't happen. And there was a very serious discussion because when she came to see us, she was very angry, not at us, but she'd had a phone call minutes beforehand and she was furious at that phone call. And that's the place where she said at the end, "You will be surprised with the very next thing I do." But the rest of it is, in my view, is rubbish. The problem with The Crown is it takes real life issues and then distorts them with tasteless distortions and errors, and they masquerade it as quality drama.
Cameron, you would think that this particular issue, these last few stages of Diana's life, could be one of the most factually accurate parts of The Crown, because, of course, this involved the death of two people. It involved a driver behind the wheel who had drunk too much, Henri Paul. And so this should have more veracity, maybe, than other episodes that might be, dealing with stuff that is just speculation. This has been pretty well documented.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly going to be the most uncomfortable series so far for the royal family. But we do have to remember that, OK, The Crown is an amazing drama, but it is very much fiction based on fact.
Yeah.
And we do not know what was said behind closed doors. We know from the inquest into the deaths of Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed that the reason for the crash was the fact that the car was driving erratically, they were being chased by paparazzi, the driver was drunk, they weren't wearing seatbelts. All of that, how much are they going to go into in The Crown? We don't know. And I think there perhaps is also a danger that viewers, maybe not so much in the UK, who have obviously grown up with the royal family, but the international audience are going to take what's said in The Crown as facts, and then that's going to distort their opinions of actual members of the royal family who are still very much alive.
Charles, that's a very important point, isn't it, that Cameron Walker's making? A lot of people, particularly the American audience for The Crown, will think that's what really happened.
Yes, that's true. But let's not forget, there's quite a few people in this country who look at The Crown and think it is an historical drama and as we used to say, Andrew, spread fact. The whole thing is actually everything that happened, and it didn't.
Cameron, let me ask you, because Andrew and I were laughing in the production meeting this morning about the fact that you weren't even born, Cameron, or maybe you were just not long born when Princess Diana sadly lost her life. But when that was the front page story of every paper in the world, actually, at that particular point. How interesting is it to you, this element of the royal family? Does it still stand out for you as a royal correspondent as one of the most significant moments in history?
Oh, absolutely. I was 9 months old when Diana died, so I don't remember her, the reports of her death. Yes, I am young, but I think Diana's legacy is still very much there because, of course, Prince William does all this work with homelessness. His first patronage was Centre Points, which his mother, Diana, took him to and inspired him to help more vulnerable people in society. Prince Harry, as well, has at length talked about the impact that his mother had on him, and I think perhaps we can see parts of Diana from in her two sons. So I think she's still very much part of the conversation, and I think when William becomes king as well, there's no way he's going to let his mother's legacy die.
Charles, as you covering that story, it was, I mean, I was involved in the story. I was working for the Times back then. There was some people who thought the monarchy would not survive the death of Diana in those horrific circumstances. But here we are, 25 odd years later, and it's still going strong.
Well, first of all, Bev, thanks for making me feel very, very old this morning.
All of us, Charles.
I much appreciate it. But you're absolutely right. You know, when Diana died, there was a great feeling that by a great many people that it was curtains for the monarchy, really, that it was the end. And you're absolutely right. Here we are, 26 years later. We have a new king. We have a new queen. The monarchy will survive, as it has survived everything else that it's happened. And they always say, Andrew, Bev, time is a great healer.
Yeah.
Really.
I'm surprised, actually, Cameron, that this is the last series, in a way. But I guess how modern can they go? Because, of course, the next generation is William and Harry, and, frankly, their life is stranger than drama anyway, most times.
Yeah, I think it's getting way too close to home now. So we know that the series is going to end with the wedding of the then Camilla Parker Bowles and Prince Charles, now, of course, the King and Queen. So it's going to end on a happy note. Perhaps the public and indeed Queen Elizabeth II accepting Camilla as the loving wife of the future king. So it is going to end happily. But, of course, you've had all this turmoil from the early 90s and, of course, Diana's death as well.
All right, that was Charles Ray, former royal editor son, and our very own royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. And, of course, you'd have to just think, what would Diana have made of the fact not only did Camilla, who she called the enemy, marry her former husband, she's now Queen Camilla.
Right, still to come.
That in 97, would you?
No, not at all. Right, still to come. Missing packages. 1 out of 3 consumers experienced a delivery problem with parcel firms in just the last month.
And perks of the job. Is it fair for a primary school teacher to be changing nappies?
Outrageous. Cool. That and much more after your morning's news with Sophia Wensler.
It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Lord David Cameron has visited Ukraine for the first time as Foreign Secretary. Video of the surprise visit to Kyiv was posted on social media, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he's grateful for the UK's support, given the world isn't focused on the war in his country. The talks address the need for weapons on the front line, strengthening air defence and protecting Ukraine's infrastructure and people. The Prime Minister insists flights to Rwanda will go ahead in the spring as planned. Rishi Sunak is looking to introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's asylum policy is unlawful. The Prime Minister says he's working on a new international treaty to ensure the East African nation is deemed safe. Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey says Labour isn't a party of protest. His comments come in the wake of a major rebellion on the war in Gaza. 56 of Sir Keir Starmer's MPs rejected their leader's position, which called for a pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas. 10 shadow ministers and parliamentary aides quit or were sacked so they could vote for an SNP motion demanding an immediate ceasefire. The carcass of a fin whale, which was found washed up on a beach in Cornwall, is being removed and destroyed as investigations into its death continue. It was discovered on Newquay's Fistral Beach yesterday. Cornwall Wildlife Trust says examining the remains offers a window of opportunity to better understand the health of the ocean. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2411 and €1.1438 euros. The price of gold is £1,584 and 79 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,446 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, ASLEF have announced a fresh wave of walkouts over the Christmas break. It's a shame that trains no longer run on coal, as they should expect a lot in their stockings. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Driverless trains, please.
On GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:37 with Britain's News and with GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, Sir Keir Starmer has faced a major rebellion over his stance on the Israel-Gaza war, with 8 Labour shadow ministers quitting their roles to vote for an immediate ceasefire.
They include Jess Phillips, Asval Khan, Yasmin Qureshi, who they've left their roles. They're going to the backbenches because they backed the motion from the Scottish National Party.
So, former Labour Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane, joins us now. Dennis, always lovely to see you. How much of a nightmare is this for the Labour Party?
It's not, frankly, a nightmare. It's a serious problem, and there's a lot of bad whipping involved there. If I could have 1 second of technical time.
Yeah.
The SNP tabled a motion. Anybody can table a motion after the week after the Queen's speech. Their motion contained the words ceasefire, no reference to the Hamas slaughter of the Jewish people. That Labour then, I think, as we did during Iraq and other times under Tony Blair, you just leave it alone. The SNP, bit Boy Scout, they're well-meaning. I mean, the current leader obviously has got family, I think, in Gaza, so he's very emotional about it. But emotions aren't really helpful in geopolitics. But let the SNP have their moment in court. But what happened was Labour tabled its own rather wordy motion talking about longer humanitarian pauses. Exactly the government policy, exactly what Andrew Mitchell was saying yesterday, what Macron was saying the other day, longer pauses to evacuate women and children. And the Tories piled in, although it was Sunak's policy, to defeat Labour, to give Labour a pop, but what they really wanted was to ensure then that the SNP motion was called with the magic word ceasefire in it. What the difference between a ceasefire and a humanitarian, I don't know.
Yeah. But it is a difference.
It's triggered.
Yeah.
There's, there
56 MPs didn't back him.
We're more against Blair. Very early on in Blair, we had lone parents benefit. I mean, Beverley was only at school then, but you'll remember it.
I do.
And it was very embarrassing. It does happen. And the big changes, you can see that on campuses, you can see that in America, you can see that all over Europe, all over the democratic world. We now have very major Muslim communities who are British citizens, French, German, American citizens, educated professionals, the kind of people I saw on the march. It just went close to where I lived on Saturday. There were a couple of hotheads and ugly people there. Most of them were just ordinary, decent people, horrified at the images. And I personally think, as a supporter of Israel, it's doing itself serious damage by going in and killing so many people. People are horrified, and Muslim communities understandably are horrified. And I think a lot of MPs are frightened, nervous about, losing
the Muslim
support.
Well, because
to some extent.
Bev pointed out earlier, 71% of the Muslim population in this country vote Labour. Yeah. And a lot of the MPs who rebelled last night, those from the front bench, have large Muslim communities. I'm thinking about Jess Phillips, for instance, a large Muslim population.
Jess at Erdington, that's true in Brum. I was slightly disappointed in that, but she's also a very emotional person. She'll be back. Let's be very clear. A lot of the people, they're junior ministers. I don't mean to patronise in any way. Nobody in the shadow cabinet resigned. No. Because they understand the bigger stakes of Britain not breaking faith with every... Well, Joe Biden to start with, every European leader, Canada, Australia, the democratic world. But it's about, I think, a real warning shot to Keir Starmer that when Labour wins, even with a decent majority, he's got to think about parliamentary management. And sadly, that is 100% something that comes with experience. The Tories have got 250 years of managing Parliament. We haven't.
Last quick question. Do you think having the Rwanda ruling overturned by the Supreme Court was the final nail in the coffin for the Conservatives at the next general election?
No, it's one of many, many nails. I mean, luckily, I'm phoning up Suella Braverman and saying, look, you're just not being extreme enough. Get out there. You are the gift that keeps giving for Labour.
Oh, Dennis.
Dennis McShane, always good to talk to you. Now, let's see what you've been saying at home. Right,
Pam has emailed to say, great show. Thank you, Pam. At our primary school, we always have an act of remembrance with 1 minute silence on the Friday before Remembrance Sunday. The children decorate a large window with poppies, unless we forget. They know the significance of the poppy that they wear. Our school is not in the minority teaching this here in the north of England. Well done, Pam. And this was because we were discussing about these Palestinian protests last night in Downing Street and saying, actually, how few people know what they're actually standing up for, it seems.
And Mary says, I watch GB News, great channel, fantastic presenters, yes, particularly the two on at the moment. GB News is not fascist. I'm fed up with looking at these people being allowed to disrupt people's lives with the protests. Why don't the police move them to Hyde Park or some other part of the demo? Why don't I? With you 100%.
And Robert has said, I totally totally agree with Lee Anderson's remarks about the economic migrants. Why are we spending £8 million a day housing them in hotels? People are fed up of illegal economic migrants being welcomed in by border control officers. We shouldn't just stop the boats. We should turn them round and return them to France.
Absolutely right. Well,
Right.
we've got our panel back.
Well...
Oh, no, look at this. Train drivers. Can you believe this?
They're
staging one-day strikes and a 9-day ban on overtime in the run-up to the festive period. Bar humbug.
That's right. And that's what you are talking to us about. Marvellous. Sam Lister, Carol Malone are here with us. More disruption, Carol, at Christmas. Just brilliant, isn't it? 'Cause it's so easy to get around this country at the moment. You just walk out, you get in your car, you can drive everywhere, you can park your car, you get on the train, you know it's going to leave.
And they're only
None of that.
They're only earning about 60,000 a year, these train drivers.
All these union bosses who are calling these strikes, they all pretend they're for the workers. No, they're not, because the people that they're hurting are the workers. And you know, and they choose these moments to choose Christmas, to choose summer holidays, to choose Easter holidays. The thing that's going to cause the most inconvenience to working people. It hacks me off, and this is for train drivers. And I know they haven't had a pay rise since COVID. I know that. But, you know, train drivers are already on an average of 68 grand a year anyway, so they're not exactly on the bones of their backside. And plus they do overtime. And I think it's a 4-day week as well. So it's actually not a bad gig they're on. But it really hacks me off that they're choosing Christmas, because this is a time that affects kids as well as workers.
It's just families and the elderly that might not drive anymore, Sam, and teenagers who want to go and visit grandma, but they don't have a licence because they're 16 years old. This is just awful.
Yeah, but also all the businesses. So last Christmas was utterly miserable.
Yeah.
And I remember going for my my final train of the year up to Yorkshire, and it was like the Hunger Games. I mean, it really was. All the trains kept being cancelled, and then suddenly there was one train running, and everybody swarmed for it. It was awful.
And don't dare get the last train, because that often is cancelled.
It will be cancelled. Yeah, you have to kind of go for about 8 o'clock, and then you probably get on 10 o'clock. But anyway. But also, all the businesses around Christmas, so all the places, pubs, restaurants, theatre shows in the West End, all those things people do for a treat, coming down to London to do your Christmas shopping or, you know, etc., etc. Every time these trains cancelled, all those businesses lose out. And I just think it's so selfish to hit businesses, families, at a time when we're still really struggling as a country.
And it'd be another blow for the high street, which is already beleaguered.
You know what? I have this terrible sense, Carol, that because the unions are so in hock with the Labour Party, we're just going to see more and more of this in the run-up to the election, just to convince the public that the country is broken.
And I think we'll see more after, because what these unions will think is, because they've got a Labour government, they can ask for what they want and they're going to get it. And of course, Keir Starmer will have a reality check and he'll say you can't have it. So they'll be even more, and they'll be even angrier with Labour than they are with the Tories, because they'll expect Labour to give them what they want. I just think it's, you know, holding the public to ransom like that. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of these union leaders, and honestly, you know, I despair of... it's like they live in a different world. They talk about the working classes like they're a different race, and like they're a different race, like they're a different class, not understanding that they're hurting the very people who work for them and who keep their jobs open. You know, if it wasn't for the public, British Rail wouldn't exist.
But they are definitely doing this in a coordinated way to cause maximum damage to the Tories. And we've seen that with the British Medical Association, because they've accepted a pay deal, haven't they, Sam, up in Scotland, very similar to one offered in England, but they won't even entertain it in England.
It's politically motivated. There's a massive political motivation to these things. The BMA, I know there's great frustration in government about the doctors' unions and the very, very militant people who've overtaken the running of those. And they feel it's impossible to negotiate because actually they've got a political agenda, and this is part of the problem.
Just so before we change, would it change now there's a new health secretary? Is that possibly going to...
I think they are hoping that it will give... it will be a chance to kind of reset, to start again, to kind of start on a fresh foot. But I don't know...
Remind us who she is, the new health secretary.
Victoria Atkins.
Yeah. No one's ever heard of.
No, and I can tell you that she's a very, very wet Tory. She's on the wet side of the Tory wing.
She's a centrist.
She's an arch Remainer too. But maybe she can kickstart the conversation. I think it'll be a struggle.
She was.
Talking of the run-up to Christmas, right, we're getting to that point where anybody that shops online is having a stream of parcels arrive at our houses right now. People are not happy, Sam. This is because 2 out of 3, is it?
No, it's one in 3
customers. So 2 in 3 are happy. 1 in 3 are unhappy with the miserable service.
I can't believe 2 in 3 are happy. I mean, have you ever met anybody who's been happy with their parcel delivery service? I certainly haven't. I mean, you know, it talks about the worst offenders. The worst offenders are Yodel, 40% unhappy, DPD and Every, which I think is...
EV, right, that is. There's a lot of clothes come from Every.
Every. Weren't they Hermes?
Hermes, yeah, they were, and they changed.
And they've changed. But, you know, I mean, we've all had the list of stories we can all tell about parcel deliveries. I've had a cactus that was put on its side and left at the front door. I've had parcels just thrown all over the place, parcels stolen. I mean, you know, it's just...
I don't think I ever buy anything online.
Well, probably very wise.
But the thing is...
Well, there is that. It is a factor.
Yes, others do. But, you know, a friend of ours recently, her dog's ashes were sent by DPD.
Right.
And lost them.
Oh, that's unforgivable.
And it turns out they were thrown over a gate behind a bin.
No.
You can't be shoving something that's got, you know, fragile stuff inside over a blooming gate. It
sounds like a scene out of Only Fools and Horses you've just described, Carol.
And Evie is the worst. I've had terrible problems with Evie, awful problems, where they say, we've delivered. I said, no, you haven't.
You know what's happening? I'm on one of those websites I'm a bit addicted to with the local neighbourhood. So it tells you what's going on. And people are posting pictures every single day of their front door cameras with absolute idiots walking along and nicking the parcels. What they do now, you won't know this, Andrew, but what they do now, the delivery drivers, if nobody's there, they just leave it on your doorstep. There's something quite nice in 1950s about that. You get home and there's your parcel on the doorstep. But they're getting nicked now by professional nickers.
Every delivery service says, do you have a safe space? Yes, we have a safe space. I have a
and
space.
They don't put it there.
Space, and they don't put it there. They put it right on the front mat in front of the door, and they take it.
And then it's And does the stuff get pinched from your doorstep?
It hasn't yet, but it has from my neighbour's doorstep. That's for sure. I mean, mine's only dog food and rubbish like that.
Well, John Murphy's not having dog food.
Knock themselves out with that.
Yeah.
But can we talk about this trans story?
Yes.
I really want to talk about this.
It's incredible.
As I just used the phrase professional knickers, this feels quite appropriate. This, Carol.
Oh yeah, good thing. Oh, actually, Sam's got a story about it. But anyway,
go on.
I'm going to tell trans knickers. Oh, trans.
No,
this is a woman called Steph Richards. She's been put in charge of the an endometriosis charity. It's called South Coast Endometriosis. Anyway, so she's 70 years old. She's a Labour activist. She's and she's the most important thing about her is that she's a man living as a woman, and as such has absolutely zero understanding of endometriosis, of what it means.
Explain to people what that is, Kath.
Endometriosis is about the lining of the material on the lining of your womb grows elsewhere. In you know, down there, and it's actually agonisingly painful. It can make periods terribly painful. It can cause miscarriages. Now we have this trans woman who has been put in charge of this charity, and she says that she's perfectly entitled to be there because she knows of. She said there were 29 men who had endometriosis. Well, that's tosh because they're not men. They're biological women who are living.
And I didn't know men had a womb.
Men don't have a womb.
I don't have one.
Well,
that's the point.
The thing is, there's a grain of truth in what she's saying, right? And this, I asked a doctor about this yesterday. So apparently there have been studies of men, but this is how it's hijacked, right? There's studies of men who have embryonic tissue depositors in their male reproductive organs, which look a bit like endometriosis cells. But in the whole of history, there have been 20 men who've been recorded as this. Whereas endometriosis is very common in women.
She says it's 29. It's actually the proper accurate record in this country, in the UK, is 16.
But just imagine that they've taken a predominantly female illness, disease.
And she's hijacked it.
And then morphing it, Sam, and wrestling it into some sort of shape. So we're now talking about men. How does that happen?
It's just utterly baffling. I think the problem is when you do these changes to health literature, to leaflets about these diseases or illnesses, you are confusing people. Now, when it comes to women's health, a lot of women can be afraid to go forward and ask about advice about something. They don't really understand things. So being clear about what the issues are, who it affects, what the symptoms are, is really, really important. When you start fudging these issues and talking about people who identify as women or...
decision by the charity, isn't it, to take
their
a trans
literature
woman.
says 1 in 10 people get endometriosis. No, they don't. 1 in 10 women get endometriosis.
But, I mean,
they won't use the word women.
Like they couldn't find a woman to run this charity.
It's a political statement, isn't it?
And this woman...
And this is part of the problem, because actually Are you trying to help women with this illness?
Yeah.
Or are you making this a political statement about who is a woman?
Yeah. See, yesterday I was quite in defence of her, Carol, because I was saying, you know, you don't have to be a man to run a prostate cancer charity. I think you do a brilliant job of generating money for running a prostate cancer charity. But what she's gone on to say in the interviews worries me.
No, but the thing that, and I think Emma Barnard pointed this out to her yesterday.
That was on Woman's Hour on Radio 4.
Emma Barnard. This woman said, you know, already I've had more publicity for this charity than anyone else ever has. Yeah, but they're not talking about endometriosis. They're talking about her and the fact she's trans. So this isn't helping women who are sitting at home in agony now and don't know what to do.
Right, Sam and Carol, as always, never enough time. We have so many words, we barely fit them in. Right, up next, it's GB News Live with Pip Thompson and Tom Harwood. What have you got on the show today, guys?
Well, there's still fallout from that dramatic display in Parliament last night. More than a quarter, almost a third of all Labour MPs disobeying Sir Keir Starmer, taking the SNP line on this whole Gaza situation instead, leading to 10 members of Sir Keir Starmer's shadow front bench losing their jobs. The ripples are reverberating through the Labour Party, and we're going to speak to one councillor who quit the party, leading to the Labour Party losing its control of Oxford Council.
Also, of course, we are talking about those pro-Palestinian protests which took place again last night. And the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has been fielding questions this morning. He's been speaking at the Institute for Government. Find out what he had to say. Also, Tom's favourite story is about a whale.
That's certainly true. I'm sure that we've been talking about this quite a bit. There's been some developments down in Cornwall. We'll find out exactly what those are too.
Oh, the poor deceased whale. Sounds fantastic, guys. I'm particularly interested to know what Mark Rowley had to say.
Yeah, people say, is he Mark Rowley? Mark Rowley, and I would say no, he's Mark Useless.
Right, end of the show, end of the week for us. Britain's Newsroom will be back tomorrow. You're with GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello again, Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Ahead of a drier day for many of us tomorrow, we have quite a bit of rain around today, the heaviest of which is in association with an area of low pressure which is tracking its way eastwards just to the south of the UK, but it does clear away, and so the heaviest, most persistent rain will also clear away from the southeast as we go through the afternoon. Quite a cloudy picture following in behind, some lingering mist and fog across far northern parts, but also the best of any sunshine likely for northern Scotland, and then a heavy band of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland too. Could be some thunder mixed in with this. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, just about getting into double figures towards the south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we are going to see then that band of rain pushing its way eastwards across many parts of England and Wales, and also Scotland could be a little bit heavy for some of us. Ahead of it, some low temperatures likely and a bit of mist and fog quite likely towards the northeast of Scotland, and behind it clearer skies allowing temperatures to take a bit of a dip, so it could be a touch of frost around first thing Friday morning, but also some patches of fog or freezing fog. Friday itself, though, looks like a largely dry day. Plenty of sunshine on offer. Any rain will quickly clear away towards the east, and then apart from a few showers, most likely towards western areas, which will ease through the day, it is looking largely dry, with a good deal of sunshine around before some wet and windy weather arrives later, pushing its way into the weekend. Temperatures for many a touch higher than today. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the